old school country folk, hilarious DUIs, and lots of Democrat jokes. We're not talking about a Trump rally after party. This is The Ranch. The Ranch is a 2016 Netflix situation comedy which just wrapped its 6th season. It stars Sam Elliott as Bo Bennett, the father of the family, Ashton Kutcher as Colt Bennett, the youngest son, Danny Masterson as Rooster, the older brother, Deborah Winger as Maggie, the mother, Elisha Cuthbert as Abby, who is Colt's love interest, Dax Shepard as Luke, the cousin, and Megan Price as Mary, Rooster's love interest. This show is from the creators of That 70s Show, Boy Meets World, and Designing Women. So between the cast and the people behind the show, there is a lot of situation comedy history here. So the premise of the show is pretty simple and straightforward. The Bennett family's youngest son, Colt, has returned after 15 years of being away trying to be an NFL quarterback. While he did have some success, he never quite made it to that level that he wanted to, and the opportunities for his sporting career have basically dried up. So he's come back to his family, the Bennett's Colorado cattle ranch. A lot of people aren't happy to see him, and those who are still aren't very impressed by his city boy ways. Will he stick around and be part of the Bennett family and their ranch, or will he strike out again trying to find that elusive quarterback job in the NFL? So as you guys know, when I talk about TV shows, I give you the good, the bad, and then I give you my score. That being said, let's talk about the good. When it comes to The Ranch, the story of the family is what keeps you watching. The premise and the storyline often do elevate it to more than just a normal situation comedy. The highlight of the show is of course Sam Elliott and his deadpan delivery as Bo Bennett, the patriarch of the family and the head of their ranch. Sam Elliott has always been brilliant. Ever since I was a kid, I've loved watching him act, and he just gets better with age. Even though he's in his 70s now, he's still a badass. And he brings a lot of depth, emotional range, and weight to this show. Pretty much the whole show throughout the entirety of the 6 seasons has been shot in a studio. But because the production and set design is so convincing, it really feels like a lot of times you are at a ranch, you're not in some TV studio. They even have little animations in the back. You'll see clouds moving, you'll see cows, you'll see birds flying through the air, and you see this a lot, so it doesn't just look like a static stage. As somebody who grew up in the South and lived on an actual ranch in Tennessee, I can say that this show does have a sense of authenticity and a down-home feel that you would find on a ranch. While the production and set design do help give you that feel, the cinematography is also nicely done for a situation comedy. So much so that I think it's been nominated 4 or 5 times for its cinematography and its set and production design. Something else that gives the show a little bit bigger feel than it actually is all the side characters. All the side characters are written pretty well, and they are pretty funny, and they all look unique, so they are pretty memorable. When it comes to the main characters, I really love the chemistry between Danny Masterson and Ashton Kutcher's characters, Rooster and Colt. You really do feel like they are brothers. And at first, you do feel that rift that was created with Colt's absence, which of course left Rooster, his older brother, behind to have to take care of the ranch with his father, basically on their own. But as the show progresses, their relationship gets tighter and tighter, their chemistry gets even better, and they do have some pretty funny moments. And of course, the fact that Danny Masterson and Ashton Kutcher have been friends for years and years, ever since the beginning of That 70s Show, helps with their chemistry. I also enjoy a lot of the friction between certain characters. Bo and Colt's relationship is really damaged, and they have a lot of work to do before they can get it back to being somewhat decent. And of course, Sam Elliott's performance as the grumpy father really drives that home. I also enjoy the relationship between Maggie and Bo, the mother and father. They've had issues for a long time. They're actually separated and living apart from one another. They do love one another, but they can't really stand to be around each other for too long. And as somebody who came kind of from a broken home, it comes off as pretty realistic a lot of the time. Speaking of modern day, I love that they touch on a lot of the things that modern ranchers have to deal with these days. Having seen and experienced firsthand what it's like to live on a ranch and the chores and all the stuff that you have to deal with, it is pretty authentic, and they do touch on some pretty cool details that a lot of shows maybe wouldn't touch on. So I'm pretty sure they have some type of a consultant on the show who kind of helps them with the ranching stuff. Now let me be clear, this show is not a laugh-a-minute comedy romp. But it does have enough charisma and family dynamic centered plotting to give it a lot of heart and to keep you interested. So there's been 6 seasons so far, and the end of each season has always had a pretty good cliffhanger to where you want to see what happens next. And unlike a lot of sitcoms, the cliffhangers don't repeat, they're always something different. The first half of a season will be the resolution of whatever that cliffhanger was, and the second half is normally a build-up to another really cool cliffhanger. One of the things that keeps me watching is the charm of the main characters. They all have certain things that you really like about them. You really want to see what happens to those characters and what happens to the family as a whole. And I think adding Dax Shepard as Cousin Luke this season added a little bit different of a dynamic, and I think it helped the show. And one of the last things that I really like about the show is whenever new seasons come out and I have stuff to do, like I have to edit a video or I have to do some paperwork or whatever, I can put the ranch on and have it playing in the background, still see what's going on, understand what's happening, and get my work done. So that's what I think is good about the ranch. Now let's talk about the bad. Those cliffhangers I was talking about, while they are usually interesting and you do want to see what happens next, they are almost always resolved within the first few episodes, so it's almost like they don't matter. They were just there to keep you coming back and watching. They don't have like a long-lasting impact. Everyone in the show just moves on with their life no matter what the thing was, which is kind of strange. For a sitcom about a bunch of rough and tumble cowboys trying to make a living, they sure do play it safe. I mean, especially considering the fact that it's on Netflix, so they don't have to worry about time slots or censors and all this kind of stuff. They can say and do what they want with the show, and it being a situation comedy, you think they would. You think they try to push boundaries, but they really keep it safe as possible. Honestly, a lot of times it feels like they are just going out of their way to be as non-offensive and vanilla as possible, to appeal to as big an audience as they can. And of course, I haven't mentioned it yet, but the elephant in the room is the fact that Danny Masterson was fired from the show. And whether you agree with the reasoning behind it or not, I do have to admit him not being on the show has hurt it. He did add a lot of charisma to the show, and honestly, he was one of the funniest characters. Now, I know that's not saying a lot because honestly, this show is not that funny. That sounds really bad and kind of mean, but I've never had like a laughing fit because of the show. Something that was said or done that was so funny that I kept laughing and I had to like pause or whatever or watch it again. That's never ever happened with this show, and that's what happened with me in almost every other sitcom that I've ever watched. As a matter of fact, throughout the past 6 seasons, I think maybe a handful of times I've laughed out loud. Most of the time I kind of chuckle to myself where I think, well, that's pretty funny. And that's not really the result you want from a sitcom. Honestly, to me, it feels more like a lighthearted drama. It doesn't feel like a situation comedy. It feels like a drama with some humor in it. And I think on that level, it does somewhat work. And of course, it's being a situation comedy. The situation is troubled son left, came back to the ranch, and now he has to adapt to it and to the family again. But they don't do nearly enough with this situation. More pointedly, the ranch stuff. They do show some stuff, especially the earlier seasons, like them fertilizing the cows, and they're actually like putting their hand up in there and all that kind of stuff like they would do at a real ranch. But in these later seasons, they've really kind of gone away from that, and it's more about the characters and their personal situations, and they don't talk a lot about the ranch issues. And when they do, it's kind of glossing over it. Oh, we're having a problem with the cattle. But they don't show anything about it. It's just them talking. It's all tell, no show, where it used to be a lot of show with a little bit of tell, and it worked. Not so much anymore. This show is pretty much as vanilla as a sitcom can get, and I think because of that, when something heavy happens, it almost feels like too heavy-handed. It almost feels like melodramatic, and it's a little bit overwhelming, and you kind of get taken aback by it. Maybe that works, like when Punky Brewster's friend got trapped in the refrigerator and she suffocated. And there's been a few things that happen in the show like that. The follow-through for them isn't always the strongest. One of the things I really hate about the show is the fact that it has a laugh track. I don't care if it's a live studio audience, which I don't think it is. If a show is funny, it shouldn't need it. I don't need to hear people laughing to know something is funny, especially when comedy is so subjective. It's like one of the first episodes I ever saw of How I Met Your Mother. There was a part where Jason Segel's character opened up the freezer, he grabbed something out of there, and people laughed. And I was just sitting there like, what the hell is so funny? What are people laughing at? What did he do that was hilarious? He took food out of the freezer. That makes no sense. They were really forcing it. Now, they don't force it as much on this show, and when there is something serious, you don't hear a laugh track normally, which is a good thing. Now, even though the seasons are short, they're 10 episodes at a time, and I think like 24 minutes long or whatever, sometimes they can feel like they're dragging it out in the middle a little bit. Not as bad as a lot of Netflix shows, but it can get a little slow sometimes. If the show The Ranch wants to keep going, they really need to step it up with the jokes. They really need to step it up with a lot of the intrigue and the plots and the storylines. They have these big things happen all the time, usually once or twice a season, and then it's forgotten. And not just by the viewer, it happens with the people on the show. The characters on the show just kind of shrug off all these serious things that have happened to them. And we're talking about a lot of stuff here: broken relationships, failures, miscarriages, heart attacks, alcoholism, DUIs, wildfires that destroy homes, so much stuff, and none of it matters. None of it matters. Now, I don't mean to sound like I have a stick in my ass, but there are so many jokes about driving drunk and DUIs and alcoholism and all this stuff throughout the 6 seasons. And not even just like with Rooster's character, with a bunch of different people. Drinking and driving, not funny. With all that being said, what is The Ranch's score? Drum roll, please. 5 out of 10.